All right, then on to the thoracic cage. So the thoracic cage, the thorax refers to the chest, and the bony structure below it is referred to as the thoracic cage. And there's three parts to it. There's the thoracic vertebra in the back there. We have the ribs, and we have the sternum, and we also have these costal cartilages, that connect the ribs to the sternum. Thoracic cage does a bunch of things. It's a protective cage for the thoracic organs. Here's the lungs underneath there. We have the heart right there. So protection for a lot of important organs. It also supports the pectoral girdles. So we'll talk about the pectoral girdles later, but a pectoral girdle consists of the clavicle and the scapula back here. And what they do is they connect the upper limb to the axial skeleton. So the pectoral girdle, which is actually part of the appendicular skeleton, it attaches to this thoracic cage. And in particular, here's the clavicle, and it attaches to the sternum of the thoracic cage to form the sternoclavicular joint. And this is actually the only bony joint that attaches the upper limb to the axial skeleton. So anteriorly, that's where the pectoral girdle attaches to the axial skeleton. On the back, posteriorly, here you have your scapula, and they aren't attached to the axial skeleton directly. They're actually attached via skeletal muscles that attach it to the thoracic vertebra there. Provides attachment points for muscles of the chest, back, and neck. The thoracic cage does. So here's the latissimus dorsi up here, and it attaches to the part of the thoracic vertebra there, and also the lumbar vertebra. Here's the sternocleidomastoid, which allows you to rotate or move your head that way, and it attaches to the manubrium down there, which is part of the axial skeleton. The pectoralis major here, attaching to the clavicle, but also the sternum here as well. Okay, now the spaces in between the ribs are called intercostal spaces, and these are occupied by intercostal muscles. And these intercostal muscles are going to be involved in breathing. And in particular, when we inhale, it's going to lift the thoracic cage up, allow us to inhale, and when we exhale, it's going to depress the thoracic cage. Then I just thought this was a pretty cool picture showing you the different layers of the thoracic cage with the pectoralis major over the top of it, and then the ribs underneath, and then everything going on underneath there. Then we have the sternum. Sternum is also called the breastbone. It's a long, flat bone composed of three regions: the manubrium, the body, and the xiphoid process. And there's a couple features here. This is something called the jugular notch. Okay, this is something called the sternal angle. And these, you can palpate these, and that's handy because clinically because they're landmarks for other features. So if you palpate the jugular notch, you're in line with other features. And this is what this is showing here. This is your jugular notch, which again you can palpate. And the jugular notch is generally in line with the second and third thoracic vertebra right there. And it's also where the common carotid artery comes out of the aorta. Okay, so yeah, the sternum is cartilaginous originally, and then it ossifies at different times throughout life. This sternal angle here usually remains non-united because you want that to swing for during breathing. And then this just shows the other times when all these things ossify. Your xiphoid process down here, this is about your 40th year of life is finally when that thing ossifies, turns to bone. So here's the manubrium, and the manubrium articulates laterally with the clavicles, okay, to form the sternoclavicular joint, like I mentioned earlier. It also articulates with the first two pair of ribs. There's one pair, there's another pair. You have costal notches right there where it articulates with the costal cartilages. And then we have the xiphoid process down here, which again is cartilage until about the age of 40. So with all this in mind, when you give CPR, which is a life-saving technique when the individual's heart has stopped producing contractions or breathing has stopped, and so you want to restore circulation, and the hand placement is critical. So what you don't want to do is give compressions on the xiphoid process, because that can break. So what you want to do is identify the xiphoid process and then move up here into the sternal body for chest compressions. Okay, then we have the ribs, and there's 12 pairs of ribs that all attach anteriorly to the sternum via these costal cartilages right here. Now, ribs 1 through 7 are called true ribs, and this is because they each have their own costal cartilage. So what does that mean? So here's a rib, and here it has its own costal cartilage, which attaches it to the sternum. Same goes for, so this is rib 1, rib 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So even with 6 here, you can see it has its own costal cartilage, and here's 7 that has its own costal cartilage. Now, ribs 8 through 10 are false ribs because their costal cartilage does not connect directly to the sternum. What it does, so here's ribs 8 and 9, their costal cartilages come over here and they merge with the one above it. So these are false ribs. And then ribs 11 and 12 are also false ribs, but these are complete floating ribs. They don't have any costal cartilage associated with them. And then there's a couple bone markings on the rib that you guys are going to need to know, I believe. One is the head, one is the tubercle, and these are the attachment sites where they attach to the thoracic vertebra. So here you have the head attaching to the thoracic vertebra, and there you have the tubercle attaching to the thoracic vertebra, and then it wraps itself around.